Welcome to this introductory video on the Titus family of classification solutions. This family provides a classification platform for your email and all of your electronic files. The family of solutions can help organizations classify their information, mark or label sensitive information, and also protect sensitive information from costly data leaks. Let's have a closer look at this family of products.
This video will provide an overview of the Titus classification family of solutions, which include Titus message classification for Outlook, Outlook Web Access, and Lotus Notes, the Titus classification for Microsoft Office product, and the Titus classification for desktop product, which provides classification of any file on your desktop. Let's start our demonstration in the message classification for Outlook product, which provides classification and labeling for Outlook messages. This is Alice's inbox. Alice is an employee of the finance department and often has to deal with sensitive information. Alice is going to begin by creating a new message. She wants to send a message to Bob in regards to some sensitive financial information. When we open the window here, we can see that message classification has added something we call the one-click toolbar. This allows users to quickly see the classifications and through the tooltips to see what the classifications mean. Each one is described here, so we can see that public is information that can be shared outside of the organization, whereas confidential was information that can only be shared under NDA. This one-click toolbar allows us to quickly select a classification when we compose a new message. In this case, we're going to send a message to Bob about the fourth quarter earnings planning. And this message will contain some sensitive information about the financial planning. So in this case, we'll want to go up to the one-click toolbar and select the restricted classification for this particular message. Once that's been selected, we can then go ahead and send that message off. And we'll have a look at what that looks like at the other end in a second. But before we do that, let's open another message. And this message also Alice is going to send to Bob about a planning meeting. And in this case, Alice tries to send the message without selecting a classification, so we'll see what happens. In this case, message classification is going to prompt Alice to select a classification, and she won't be able to send the message until that classification is selected. This is what we call the forced classification, and that's an option which can be turned on in message classification. Now if we switch over and look at what that message looks like when Bob receives it, you can see that Bob has received this internal use only message from Alice, and that message classification has added a header and footer label to the message, as well in this case as a disclaimer. All of these things can be customized using the message classification administration tool. When a message is forwarded or replied, we can see that the classification is maintained. In this case, the internal use only classification was maintained, so the user doesn't have to reselect that classification. Now let's see how message classification can be used to prevent costly email data breaches. In this case, Bob wants to send an email on the October financial results to Alice. We can see that when Bob selects Alice, Outlook provides a nice menu here with all the previous Alices that he's sent to. Unfortunately, in this case, Bob mistakenly chooses a Hotmail address rather than the corporate email address for Alice. Bob now goes ahead and composes his message, which contains sensitive information. The company has a policy that this type of sensitive information cannot be sent outside of the organization. So when internal use only is selected and send is selected, a message classification displays a policy saying that Alice at Hotmail is not clear to receive this type of message. Bob has the option here of returning to the message, so he can go ahead and do that. And he can see that he selected the wrong Alice, so he can change his Alice to the correct internal Alice and then send that message off. Now that we've seen how message classification can help us classify and label email messages, let's turn our attention to another member of the classification family, Titus classification for Office, which helps us label and classify Word, Excel, and PowerPoint documents. Here we can see within Microsoft Word we have a one-click toolbar very similar to what we had in Outlook, which allows us to quickly select classifications using the one-click method. In this case, we've selected an internal use only classification, and we can see a header that's been placed into the document. If we change that to a confidential selection, we can see that Titus classification for Office will go and change the headers and footers in the documents to reflect the new confidential classification which has been selected. All right, well, let's close this document down and open up a new document now. We're going to create a new document. And this new document is going to be on third quarter revenue financial analysis. As you can see, this document currently doesn't have any classification, so there's no headers and footers in the document. If we try to save this document without a classification, again, the Titus classification for Office product can force us to select a classification. Same if we try to print the document, again, we're forced to classify. This again is an option that the administrator can set up. Now we'll select the confidential classification, and we can see that the confidential header was placed into the correct place. Now let's have a look at the final member of the Titus classification family of products, the Titus classification for desktop. It's a tool which can be used to classify any type of file on your desktop. It's available in the familiar Windows Explorer interface and can be used to classify files like images, CAD drawings, PDFs, or really any type of file. Here we have a TIFF file which has been produced by scanning a document. In this case we want to classify this document, so we right click on it, we get the classification menu, and in this case we're going to select a classification of confidential. When we do that, we'll see that an overlay icon appears on that TIFF with the Titus logo, and this indicates that the file has been classified. Here we can see a PowerPoint file which has also already been classified, and we right click on that file. We can see that the classification has already been selected. We can see through the check mark that it has an internal use classification. That overlay icon, in this case being the Titus logo, can be changed to whatever you want to indicate the classification. Finally, let's have a look at how the classification family of products integrate with Microsoft SharePoint. Here we're in SharePoint 2010 in the Finance Department library, and we see that the library contains a number of columns, including the name of the document and the classification. In the last column there, you can see the classification has been reflected. Now let's open up a new document that we want to bring into our SharePoint document library. This is a press release about the fourth quarter earnings that's been written. It's a confidential document, as you can see here, as reflected on the toolbar also. And we want to bring this confidential document into our finance library. When we bring it into the finance library, we certainly want that classification to show up to users in SharePoint so they can see what the classifications are. Let's upload this document into Microsoft SharePoint. So let's browse and select that fourth quarter earnings release document. Once we've selected that document, you'll see that when we go to bring it into SharePoint, we'll see a menu which reflects all of the metadata which were brought into SharePoint. And the confidential classification, as you can see, has been imported, so the user doesn't have to do anything. Once that classification has been selected in Word, it'll automatically come up into SharePoint and be reflected here for users so they can see it. Users can then change the classification if they wanted to in SharePoint also, so I could go and edit these properties, change the classification, and then when I reopen that document in Word in the Titus products, the labels, etc. will be adjusted accordingly. That concludes our demonstration of the Titus classification family of solutions, which include classification for Outlook, Outlook Web Access, Lotus Notes, Microsoft Office, and any file on your desktop. Thank you.